Roger Tabor is the TV naturalist, biologist and outstanding authority on the domestic cat. Roger, who conceived, researched, wrote and presented the highly successful BBC TV series Cats, is also the best-selling award-winning author of Cats, The Rise of the Cat, published by BBC Books to accompany the TV series, and The Wildlife of the Domestic Cat. He's also a regular lead columnist in Cat World, the specialist cat magazine. He's only the second person this century to discover a major cat cemetery of ancient Egyptian cat mummies. The domestic cat has been biologist Roger Tabor's main animal of study for nearly 20 years. During the 1970s, he was only one of a handful of pioneer researchers then looking at feral domestic cats. He helped establish, by his observation of London's cats, the pattern of ranges used by cats. His book, The Wildlife of the Domestic Cat, published in 1983, arose from that work and was awarded the Dutch Panorama Medal. Britain's leading cat charity, the Cats Protection League, called it the standard work on the subject, and Desmond Morris described it as one of the 2 best books ever written about cats. The book was the basis for the BBC QED programme, A Walk on the Wild Side. He first appeared on television in the early 1970s on Animal Magic with Johnny Morris, and went on to present many programmes and series on wildlife and conservation. He's past editor of Countryside magazine and has written wildlife books in the Survival series published around the world, yet cats have remained his passion. We're meeting him at his home where he lives in a Georgian watermill. His own cats, Tabitha and Leroy, enjoy the country life, particularly Leroy, who started life as a stray in London. In Understanding Your Cat, Roger shows us how the cat is a true member of the cat family, and how from the moment it's born, it's learning those things necessary for it to survive. This video is an insight into the world of the cat and will help you understand your cat better.
We live in an intensively man-managed landscape. Even conkers, which I've been picking from the tree, are introduced species. We have roads to take us instead of paths. We have buildings to live in instead of the open. But the cat family itself evolved in much more of a dense undergrowth type of situation. Not buildings, but jungle. If you think in terms of either tigers or little tabby cats, it's about moving as individuals around in a fairly stealthy way in and amongst things. So seeing our cats today move in amongst this jungle isn't so strange as to see the tigers moving in amongst the bigger trees. And as a result, they're not really social animals, because when they go hunting, they do so alone. So they're really a semi-social animal. Dogs, on the other hand, are much more hierarchical. They evolved in an open plains-type landscape. So their relationship with each other is one of top and second and third and so on. And you sort that out well ahead of any hunt by aggression. So it's a hierarchical landscape for the dog and not very much so for the cat. We fit into the dog's landscape oh so easily because we are at the top of the pecking order if we've got any sense. Whereas with cats, that's not really what happens. With cats, you have a totally different type of way of life. Because they lived in that woodland landscape, the semi-social way of life is much more important. As a semi-social animal, hierarchy is really irrelevant. You're not going to get one cat saying to another cat, I'm the boss, and you're really second or third or fourth or fifth. You don't get that sort of hierarchy. Toms may have an area, queens may have an area, and so on. But life is much more about after the hunt, when they're being social. They hunt alone, so their social life is when other things are there. Not about the currency of food and catching food, but about the currency of survival that follows that. So it's about when you come together to mate, it's about when you're bringing up kittens, it's about making a landscape safe so you can rear others. And for that, hierarchy, which is based on aggression, is merely going to disperse you. What you need to have is something that bonds you positively, because the hunt is not the key thing, it's something else. It's something that enables you to come together. So if you're coming together for what I suppose in shorthand terms we could call affectionate reasons, if you suddenly start snarling at each other, the system isn't going to work so well. So in general shorthand terms, the cats have a much more gentle way of life than the dogs. Neither is better, it's just one is more appropriate for an open landscape, and one is more appropriate for a closed landscape. And our landscape today is just as closed as the wooded one of the taiga. So how does the feline semi-social way of life work? It really comes down to two things: food and range, and one dictates the other. If a cat has more and more food available, it doesn't need to go quite so far to search for it. Therefore, it doesn't need quite such a large range to go and look for that food. If you're in the islands of Scotland, then you haven't got much of a place to scavenge. You have to go over a large area, hunt for it, so you need a colossal space. If there are more cats around, it's usually as a result of more food. The packing density gets higher and higher, and you go to the other extreme in the centre of our towns, and they're really crammed in. Feral cats, stray cats, gone wild cats, that live in the centre of our towns, they still have to work for a living, because even though kind-hearted people will feed them, they still will raid into dustbins and go and scavenge and obtain food in that way. And our cats are wonderful scavengers, despite the fact they are the supreme mammalian carnivore with those beautiful fangs and those claws. They nonetheless have got this trick of scavenging, and because they can scavenge, they can get more food, and therefore they can reduce their range. But even that doesn't reduce the range as much as your cat in your back garden, because the amount of food that we make available to our cats, of course, is whenever they want it sort of thing. We're virtually putting it down their throats, and as a result, their ranges can be very small. So the densest area that you will find cats on this planet is where cats live in suburban gardens, and the density then can be very, very high indeed. And if you've got a small warren of back gardens, then the number of cats that you can get in all of those houses is colossal. The remarkable thing is that you're still getting an appearance of the wild, because we know from studies carried out on tigers and also on wild cats that you get in Scotland and across Europe, that there is a sort of magical relationship between the range of a tom and the range of a queen. The range of a tom is larger than the range of a queen. The range of a male is larger than the range of a female. And the reason seems to be social reasons. It's tied up with this social way of life. It doesn't need to eat 10 times more, which is what the ratio is, 10 to 1 or thereabouts. It doesn't need to eat 10 times more food than the female. It isn't 10 times bigger. So the reason it has 10 times more land is because the basic unit of carrying capacity of the land is dictated by that queen. Once she's fed, then there are social reasons why the tom spreads out and holds a larger area. Now, our usual idea of whether it's a tabby cat or a tiger about the male is that it's a fairly idle devil. The queen has to do all that hard work. She's rearing the young, she's supporting them. Does he go out and get the food and bring it back in? No, not when it comes to cats. So he's looking after himself, she's looking after herself. So what does he do? Well, what he does do is he spreads out and holds and maintains a larger amount of landscape. And within that, the queen or the female tiger has a supported area which she can look after her young. Now, the nice thing about our own domestic cat, when it reverts to the wild, is that it lives in a sort of landscape where the queens can actually clump their ranges together. Because we have the sort of landscape that we do, with food dolloped here or food dolloped there, a group of dustbins that feral cats can go along and scavenge at to get their food resource, then it's possible for the queens to build a landscape around it. They can have their ranges clumping over it. So the toms as well, they will clump in, they will sort of just range further. So you begin to get this dartboard arrangement with a group of queens all overlapping, and you get social advantages from that. You can even get one queen acting as an auntie to another one's youngsters, and yet the toms ranging much bigger and buffering it as a sort of safety zone against other groups, against other queens and toms from distant areas. So that's fine for the ferals, but what does that mean for your landscape with your own cat in a suburban garden? If that's how your cat lives a life, then it's fine for the queens, because they see you as members of your group, And so they will clump around you, so your back garden is fine for your queen. But what if you own a tom? Well, the toms will look around and they will see the range that the queens do use in the landscape that you have, and whatever the local queen's size of range is in the gardens, then the toms will roughly be about 10 times larger, unless it's a neuter tom, then it'll only be about 7 times larger, but it will certainly be larger. And that would take in a number of other queens, and which the toms will want to think of as theirs. But the queens are thinking of you as theirs. So the toms are looking for a group to take in those queens. Your queens are looking for you as your group, and basically this nice neat pattern that the feral groups have is suddenly breaking up. There's a bit of confusion. The queens have no problem, but the poor old tomcats in a suburban landscape, they're looking around and fine, they've got their own owners as a group, but otherwise it's a bit of a confusing place. Why are these queens not liking them as much as they should? Poor old toms. The key to the understanding of your cat, here you go, is to realize that primarily it's a woodland hunter. The cat family as a whole are a hunting family, and so their design and their build is of a hunter. But a cat, like our domestic cat, being a small felid, has great grace and ability to be able not just to run around inside an apple tree, but of course also to move in the different felids in different parts of the world, up and down trees as they're hunting. One of the key things about the cat, as it does move through this, is that tail. It's a wonderful thing for balance. We tend to see the tail working best. Have you seen footage on television of a cheetah running after prey, and then it suddenly changes direction? And if you can visualize it, you'll see the tail going rather like a gyroscope. And a tail like that is a great thing for turning against. It actually is a gyroscopic organ against which you can move. Now scale that whole thing down into an animal walking in a tree, like your own cat, and you have the same thing. As it moves around in the branches, slightly losing its balance, not perhaps hunting with the speed of a cheetah, but as it loses a balance one way or loses a balance the other, the tail starts turning in that gyroscopic way and it manages to keep its balance. It's exactly the same as when it walks along the top of your garden wall. The tail is a very helpful balancing act. And also walking on the top of a wall or on branches like this, the cat has another asset, and that's the ability to walk in a line. The inline walking is easily facilitated because the chest cavity, unlike ours, which is fairly flat that way, is fairly flat that way. So instead of the shoulder blades at the back being flat there, they're on the side of the body. So when the cat is walking, the shoulder blades are going up and down. That means you can have very narrow positioning as you walk. So walking up and down here on the branches is quite easy for a cat. We also, when you look at an animal like the cat, it's worth looking slightly closer than the living animal. In here, I've got the skull of a domestic cat. And when you look at the skull, you get a lot of information which is helpful to the understanding of the animal. One of the problems for cats, if they're ever involved in something like a car accident, or they fall from a high area, block of flats, trees, something like that, and they hit the ground very hard, something that happens all too readily is the front of the jaw, when it hits the ground, although they might be fine in other ways, because it's only lightly glued together, if you want, will come apart. So that is a sort of design fault, if you like. But the advantage for the cat, with the modification of the skull that has happened, is that it has a much more powerful bite than something like a dog. You see, a dog's skull, if you look sideways on, is much longer proportionally than a cat's skull. A cat's skull has been foreshortened down. Now that means that the cat has a much stronger bite proportionally than a dog has. And you might think, my God, dogs go out, they go, surely that has to be much more aggressive. But just scale up your own domestic cat. Think of it in terms of a tiger, and think whether you'd prefer to be attacked by a tiger or a wolf or something like that. The bite of a tiger is very, very fierce, and proportionally scaled down, the bite of your cat is very, very fierce. To make the comparisons between the dog and the cat is not invidious. There are two commonest pets that we have around in a familiar way in a setting like this. And one comes from that pack background, and the other one is a lone hunter. And as a lone hunter, it is responsible for its own survival. And so when it brings down prey, it has to be able to immobilize that prey totally. So these teeth at the front are the teeth of the killing bite. We call them, strangely, canine teeth. But of course in a cat, they're much longer and much more powerful than in the dog. So they pinion the prey. But when it comes to actually eating the prey, when you look inside here, now, for example, looking round the apple tree, I can very easily grab hold of an apple, and I can chew onto that if I wish. And at the back of my mouth, I can chew round and round and round, because I've got molars and premolars, flat teeth. And in a similar way, any animal that is going to have a fair amount of vegetation in their diet has flat teeth in the back. Think of a sheep. They're always going sideways like that. A dog has much flatter teeth at the back, but the cat has to be able to shear through its meat. These teeth at the back are not grinding teeth at all. These are the shearing teeth of an animal that needs a pair of scissors, basically, just to cut up its meat at the back. So if ever there was a hunter's mouth, this is the hunter's mouth. And those large eyes that fit into the socket, they're also part of the whole hunter's package. Fine, you've got the reflecting mirror at night to go around, but other things that are helpful at this time of day as well. Because it has such a big eye socket which enables so much light to go in, that's fine for nighttime hunting, but during the day it could be dazzled only too easily. So what it is able to do, have you ever thought why your cat goes to a slit and not to a circle? Well, that's exactly what does happen. To cut down on the light, if you just go to a circle, you can only reduce it by a certain amount. But if you can go to a slit, you have much more fine control over the amount of light you're letting in. It's not really to make it a wonderful daytime animal, it's just to facilitate at nighttime opening up that lens so much it can let in a lot of light. So just about every feature of the cat is something which is giving it an alertness and a vitality for taking on the world as a loner. But it has a wonderful last little trick. Within that eye, if you ever creep up on your cat and it's partly sound asleep, it seems to be sound asleep, and then you have a shock. What's happened to the cat's eyes? They're just white all over it. Where is its eye gone? It's because it has a third eyelid. We have two, but it has the third eyelid which comes across from the side, the nictitating membrane. That sometimes comes across when your cat is feeling slightly ill. But its main reason for coming across is so as the cat, which needs to have such a lot of sleep, can go onto autopilot. It can sort of doze off in those 18 hours of sleep a day, but being an alert hunter, it is never really fully deep and under when it wants to be slightly alert. And the slightest shadow across this half-shutter membrane, and bang, it's alert and it's ready for the world.
Your active hunting cat, of course, isn't always hunting. And moving around, how can you read its intentions, what it's meaning to do, what it's up to? Well, obviously, I think it's quite easy to read what Leroy's up to at the moment. So you can almost see the Zs coming out of his head, the snoring away. But when you look at something like a tail, if he's agitated, it can be flicking. Quite different to when he's moving it around to try and keep his balance. If he's very frightened and trying to see another cat off at the same time, the tail can enlarge, puffed up with anxiety and fear, and not only will that happen, but instead of just walking towards the other cat, he will go sideways on. So the whole width of his body can be making him look as big as is possible, and that along the spine, the hair will also come up. So very quickly the cat can look about twice the size he normally is, particularly when his legs go very stiff as well. People very often get confused between the face postures as well of a cat, whether it's in a defensive mode or an attacking mode. Now, of course, to other cats there's very little ambiguity because they are only too well aware of what happens at the ears. Now, you pop your ears round, Leroy. There we are. When you look at a cat's head, if it's relaxed, then you've got a position very much like Leroy at the moment. But when it goes into a frightened, defensive mood, cornered, and it has to be on its sort of last legs to see something off, then the ears virtually disappear from sight. They go absolutely flat down, and the cat will be cornered. If, on the other hand, you're dealing with an animal which superficially to a human could look exactly the same, going through the caterwauling or type of noises, the difference from a cat's point of view when it's reading it is that the ears are round like that. So you've got the cat, you can actually see the back of those ears from the front. So there's an attack mode where the ears swivel, but you can see the back of them from the front, or the defense mode when they're totally flat down. And of course, when you're in a defense mode, do be careful. Don't handle a cat like that, because you could come off worse. Caterwauling, though, the sounds that we hear in the outside world, people often think of as mating, and of course it happens during mating times. But usually, it's not the mating that's causing that, because you have the sort of romantic little chirps and flourishes going on between toms and queens. What is going on when you hear that caterwauling is the accumulation of males to an area attracted by that queen on heat as she goes through her rolling and her estrus tumbles and moving around, and the scent wafts out over the neighbourhood. But toms are coming in from different areas, crossing different territories, and so of course you are getting some fighting going on between those toms. And the fighting of the tom can be quite dramatic as they rake with their back legs and roll and tumble. But the tumbling of the estrus queen when she's anticipating mating is quite different, rolling over on her shoulders, and what she's saying is, oh, I'm quite keen to mate. But of course she isn't that keen actually at first, and the males are much more keen, so they will be coming up only too keen, wanting to mate. And if there's only one queen and one tom there, then initially the tom is very, very alert. Many hours on into the night, of which we'll draw a discrete veil, the exact reverse happens, because after many times of mating, what happens is the queen gets progressively more keen, and the poor old tom is saying, thank you very much. No more, that's fine. Thank you very much. And of course, sometime later, you get into the situation where the youngsters are born.
It's impossible not to fall in love with little kittens. Everybody who ever goes to a cattery just loses part of their soul. You look into these little eyes and you just begin to melt. There's no two ways about it. Even if you didn't want a cat, you will take a cat home with you, and perhaps you may take two cats home, so you have to steel yourself. One of the reasons for that is the flatness of a kitten's face is very similar to a child's face, and so with those big eyes, which are disproportionately large at this stage in the kitten's face, we just sort of go, ooh. But when they're born, life actually is the beginning of a big adventure. And what's happening is that they're launched into the world, and mum initially has to look after them totally. They're totally dependent on their mother for everything. She's feeding them, and from that milk they have to get, for the first few weeks, all the nourishment they can. They have to have that important bit of colostrum in the first instance, but after that they're getting their normal rich mother's milk. And when they're first born, she will lick away the membranes, and she will sever the cord herself that separates them from her, where they've been looked after inside her for that length of time. And once that severance is done, they're suddenly new independent kittens. Very, very rarely that occasionally goes wrong, and a mother cat will accidentally eat a kitten, but it's very, very unusual. Normally it's such a matter-of-fact event that you can take kitten birth almost totally for granted. Yes, you feel taken for granted. No, you're not really, are you? When they're at this age, they're beginning to already feel slightly larger, but of course, at the beginning, they have to sort out where the food comes from. And although this little kitten already has its eyes fully open and it's squeaking at the world, when they start off, the eyes are tight shut. So they're not getting any information from that at all. And what they get their information really from, not even hearing. Hearing, they've got some sound sense, but it's not until about day 5 that it begins to make any real impact. What they have to rely on is a sense of smell. And from that sense of smell, they can navigate their way to the mother's teat, because that's where the milk's going to come from. And also from that warmth. Mum helps. She nuzzles them along. She acts in a very kindly way. She lays open, exposing her tummy, coveting them around in that sort of way, and with her head, she just moves them in towards the teats. And very soon, in kittens, unlike in dogs really don't mind which particular teat they're going for, but kittens, they soon develop an early preference for a teat and stick with that. And the reason is quite simple. Even at this sort of young age, they have razor-sharp claws, and Mum would not want them fighting all over the teats. So what's happened is that there just has, within the sort of cat family, developed this ability to select out. And mums ever since have been grateful for that happening. So what's the age of this one, and how can you tell what happens with your kittens? There is a very definite kitten timetable in terms of development. When you look at a little kitten like this one, it clearly isn't sort of just born and a week old or anything silly like that. And it's no longer involved with mum with these long 8-hour suckles, because when they start off, once they get on the teat, they just seem to stay there indefinitely. They will squeak away like this, even at their youngest age, and let mum know that they want food, or if they get out into the cold, that they require food. When a kitten gets to about this stage of 3 weeks old, mew, 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 it's beginning to explore the world. And as it potters around, and it can only just potter around, it's not really into serious walking as yet. It's discovering walking. As it potters around, the paws are going down in a sort of fairly shaky way. It's beginning to sort of feel its way around. And because it's suddenly discovering that it can move, and it's got mates as well in the litter, these little ones, oh, careful, hang on. These little ones down here, they all begin to play with each other, and the litter mates all at once start to be able to move around, and so play as such starts properly, and they begin this rather ham-fisted way of moving, because you're still very young, aren't you? Yes, yes. But after a while, should we pop you two back down? Yes. With their unsteady means of walking, you come across to these ones here. And what a difference a week makes. These are only about a week and a half older, so they're sort of 4 approaching 5 weeks old. And already they're much more robust. They're able to deal much more with the world. Hello, you mountaineer. Now, the ones over here at 3 weeks old couldn't possibly do this. They're only just beginning to discover what moving around is, whereas, whoa, careful. Still unsteady of your feet, aren't you? Yes. But these ones, nonetheless, are learning that they can, that's it, you can come up. Yes, you can come up. That they can move around, they can mountaineer, and they can do things. Come on, there we go. Come on, there we go. In a much more strong and robust way. And the important thing, I suppose, at this stage for these kittens is, whereas up till now their senses have been developing, some of the senses they had right from day one, indeed with touch they had it before day one. They were able to have a sense of identity of touch back in the womb. But some of the senses, like vision, they didn't start with. Now at 5 weeks old, it's pretty good. Their hearing as well, they started with some, but now it's extremely good. It will continue to develop until they're about 12 weeks old, when they really have got their act together. But at this stage, they can understand the world that much better. They can see it that much better. They can hear it that much better. So life is making more sense, and they're beginning to be able to move around. Now at this age of about 4 to 5 weeks, suddenly something starts changing. When that happens, they are, of course, beginning to get not just the milk in their excreta, in a digested form, they're also beginning to get bits of vole. And if you, as an owner, are putting in cat food, then you're beginning to get a cat food becoming excreta. And that matters, because if you're the mother cat, up till now, what you've been doing is licking them on their rear end to encourage them to both defecate and urinate. because in the wild, again, it makes sense if you're not leaving a lot of mess around a nest, and mum has been looking after them very well. And that's fine while it's just your own milk gradually going through a kitten, but there gets to a point where even mothers draw the line, and suddenly when it's bits of decomposed vole that's gone through a body, you just don't want to know. So her behaviour starts changing, and as a result, hello, it's a sign that they are getting just that much bigger. And their play, although they don't look very playful, you're just after my warmth as a big mum cat, aren't you? Yes. Their play is also, at this stage, different to the young three-week-old ones. They're getting that much more robust. They're beginning to become cats that will arch and thump down on their litter mates, and they will sort of jump up and down and be batting them in sort of quite a heavy way, won't you? Now, can I pop you all back, one by one down there? Yes, yes. Yes, down you go. Gently down you go. Come on then, you two. Yes, down you come. Down you come. No, don't hang on. Down you come. There we go. That's it. Back down with your litter mates. And if I can take you over here, what I've got inside this cage are some 7-week-old kittens. Come on, little ones. There. Now, these ones have actually got to the point when they are now weaned. These are now no longer suckling from their mums, and at first sight they may look very little different to the other ones, but life now is that much more different because they are completely on solids, and it's at a time when very often people will take cats away to home them, and they are that much more independent. And when it comes to play, whereas over there the younger kittens were into this hitting down in that sort of rather larger than life kitten aggression between each other, only playfully, suddenly these are much more coordinated. As cats, this one is automatically that much more self-possessed than the ones over there. It's sitting here, it's that much more assured, its senses are that much more attuned, and so its play changes. And the play stops being this rather early batting and arching, and it becomes, hello, it becomes much more one of pursuit, really, as if they are hunting after prey. After all, mum has been bringing prey in, and they've been focusing on it. If there are toys around, if they don't live in a house with prey, they've been focusing on those toys. And it is a matter now of pursuit and coordination. And these cats are that much more coordinated. They can see what their paws are doing. And so the play noticeably changes. And mum as well, getting them to this stage that they are fully weaned, actually changes what she does. No longer does she lie back exposing all her tummy to the kittens as she did at these sort of younger ages, but as they're getting to the point of being weaned, if they're not really getting the message soon enough, she begins to just sort of slightly roll over and cover up those nipples and make sure that they really do have to start standing on their own 2 feet, 4 feet. Come on, you're going to join your litter mates down here. Yes, come on, come on. Kittens soon learn about the big bad world and how they have to get through it, partly by doing things like this mountaineering and coming to terms with what's nice and what's nasty. But they really have to learn about the world as kittens through these weeks of development at rather critical stages. The old expression was critical periods. Nowadays, biologists tend to refer to sensitive periods because really, I suppose the word critical implies if you haven't learnt it now, that's it. Well, it's not totally true, but what does happen is during the period of kittenhood, there are certain times when it's helpful if you learn about things then, because, hello, yes, you're learning very well, because later it takes a longer time to pick these things up. And one of the things which is useful when kittens are learning is that they are handled. By having time like this each day with kittens, particularly from very young age, they soon habituate to people. They learn that people aren't such terrible monsters, and their development even becomes slightly faster. And you might find that hard to believe, but they're... Come on, up you come, little one. Up you come. Woo. Because it's easy to see how they would become more outgoing with regard to other cats and to us as big cats, but it's perhaps hard to see that actually it can affect other things. But if you look, for instance, at just Siamese kittens, what you'll find is that even the dark pigmentation on their ear tips and paws happens at an earlier stage if they're handled on a regular basis. And certainly those phases of the development that they go through at the sort of right times can happen that much more quickly. But what you certainly have to be careful of with these ages is, if you can avoid it, never get the kittens away from their mum too early. Sometimes inevitably it happens if there's an accident to a mother. But if kittens come away from their mother, say before something very early, like, hello little one, 2 weeks old, then the rest of their adult lives, not just for the next few weeks, but the rest of their adult lives, they're left with that, because they will be that much more fearful and that much more aggressive, hello, in all their reactions, both with people and also with cats. Now, we've got a nice little lapful, haven't we? Yes, you're sitting very, very cosy. Now, one of the things that does happen with cats, and these are all about 4 weeks old, is that mum starts bringing home prey at this stage. And so when she starts coming in, and this is a rather unfortunate little vole that one of my adult cats brought home last night, she would bring something like this back to them. And of course, up to this stage, all they've met is mum's milk. So initially, something like that is going to seem very strange and very odd. But at this time, this sort of sensitive period in their lives, really they're very trusting. Whatever mum is going to give them, they're going to believe is a good thing. So of course, because mother is bringing back normally things like mice and things like voles, then they're going to become familiar with them. They're gradually going to learn to eat them. And what she does is, initially she brings home completely dead prey, and then as the time goes on until they're sort of more fully weaned, then she's going to bring home slightly more subdued prey but still alive, and eventually ending up with quite lively prey. And it's an event that when the prey comes into the nest with the kittens, you can look at it rather than mum sitting there wearing a sort of a blackboard behind her and a pencil and chalk and saying this is what you should be doing. In reality, what she's doing is acting as a competing kitten. She brings home prey like this, and it'll place it down in front of them, and then she will compete with the kittens to get it. And by having this competition with the kittens and saying, hello, are you going to learn about that? Yes? Are you going to learn about that? By competing with them and taking it away from them, they are going to become much more interested. Yes, oh, in fact, I'm being a competing mother. Come here, come here. Is this what your mum does? Is this what your mum does? Yes, she takes food away from you. Yes, yes. Yes. And they learn about prey by, first of all, handling it as totally dead, and eventually she will compete more and more and more and take it away. Come on. Yes. Oh, you're becoming a very big cat very quickly, aren't you? Oh, you've lost it. Perhaps it's just as well. Perhaps it's just as well. One of the things that's useful by kittens having this acceptance of what mother brings home, and they have to, otherwise when she brings home something that is live, they might just be frightened about it and change their behaviour and become very anxious, and that, of course, in survival terms would not be a good idea. It does mean that this trust that they do give to what she brings home, if, for example, she brought home apples or bananas, strange as it may seem, and you'd never, if you just gave dishes of apples and bananas to these cats, never in a month of Sundays would they accept it. But after a little while of not wanting to take it on board, you will find that kittens, if mother is about and there is some strange food like that, they will learn to accept it. Now, the important thing for us as owners to bear in mind from that is, if when your kittens are fairly young, you are giving them a range of foods, it does mean that as they go through later life, at least they've got that exposure to it, and it stops them being quite so fatty. Because as we all know, cats become very, very fatty about their foods, and if you've only started them off on one sort and that's all they know about, then really you're making a rod for your own backs. If you can introduce them at this sort of stage, as they go through weaning, up to the time they're weaned, on a range of sort of foods that they're likely to encounter when you're bringing them up, then they'll be that much more flexible in their older lives. What's important to bear in mind, of course, when it comes to nutrition of young kittens, is that mum mustn't be undernourished, because if you've got a severely undernourished mother, then she's going to produce severely undernourished kittens, and they are going to be backward in their learning development. those various phases that the kittens go through are all put back. It's as if the clock is just wound that much slower. So good feeding for mum is just as important for the good feeding for the young kittens. One of the nice things about kittens at this stage, when they are beginning the process of weaning, they are that much more flexible. If somebody else, like that rabbit, is introduced into the nest, then they assume that it's perfectly all right there. Rabbits, if they want to be in the nest area, are fine to be there, because if mum trusts them, then it's all part of the great game of life. If it's something outside of the nest, that's something totally different. But the nest is a safe haven. And up to the end of weaning, really up to about 7 weeks or so, anything like a rabbit that just happens to live in the nest at the same time as you as a little kitten, you will trust, and you will think of it as some other sort of cat. And clearly, if mum is going to trust that, then it's a trustworthy animal. But it isn't just a rabbit. It could be a rat. It could be just about anything. And over the centuries, all sorts of strange animals have crept in and for some reason been accepted by the mother cat and have grown up as almost a cat with these little kittens, or at least in the kitten's eye view, they are cats. And you get a realization of quite how strong this printing in the early kitten's mind is when you think that, for example, there are different varieties of rats. And if a particular variety of rat was introduced with these youngsters and the mum allowed it at that stage, they would grow up thinking of it as a fellow littermate. And when many years on in adult life they met the same sort of rat, then they would just accept it. But if it was another variety of rat, then they would probably kill it and act quite aggressively towards it. So even when you're looking at a species like a rat, it's not just that. They get to know the individual type of animal and recognize it as a fellow littermate, as a fellow kitten that they've been brought up with. There's harvesting going on in the hayfield here, so soon Leroy's ability to catch some of the prey here is not going to be quite as easy as it has been, is it? No, you terror. He's just presented me with a vole while out here in the field, and he's a demon catcher of everything. But usually he doesn't present me with prey out. What he does, and I'm sure your cat does the same to you, presents you with prey back in the house. We're never quite sure how much of the prey that is caught out and about goes straight down the gullet when it's caught, and how much is taken back home. The strange thing is, why is anything ever taken back home? People for centuries have puzzled over this, but from the point of view of the biology... Ooh, where are you going? 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 From the point of view of a biologist looking at it in this century, I suppose the main reason is one of display. When a cat is living in a semi-social group, either in a feral state or with us, and it amounts really... Go on then, off you go. You're going to hunt something. No, straight back home. When you're either in a semi-social group with us or out in a feral group, the same thing really amounts, because when he goes and catches something, he takes it back into the core area of his range. Why on earth is he doing it? The most obvious thing that's going to happen is that one of the other cats, or me, or you, are going to take the prey away from him, and if you're squeamish, you'll probably throw it away and say, oh, how terrible. If you're a biologist like me, you'll look at it and say, oh, that's interesting, what has he caught? But if you're a cat, the chances are you're going to say, ah, lunch, thank you very much, and eat it. So what's in it for the cat? Why on earth do they take anything back in? And I think it is this understanding that it is a semi-social animal, that we do have these groupings, that begins to make some sense of it. It's not just a food loss, because the cat, in the genetic long-term sense, is not just supporting himself. There is that group survival. After all, his genes are normally being passed on to the kittens of that group. So taking prey back into that group area, after all, we've just seen mum, and we talked in terms of mum taking food back, that makes sense. But dad taking food back, after all, as we know in cats, they're not really that involved with the kittens, with the upbringing. But to take it back and to display in the general area of the core area does make sense. Because one thing it's saying to all the cats of the group, and that includes a pretend cat like myself, is that there is a lot of prey around here. If you're regularly just catching prey and you're taking it back in, then it's a message, it's a hoarding, it's a good place to be. And after all, one of the things that you have to do as a cat group, as opposed to a dog group, is have something that keeps the group together. Dogs, of course, keep their groups together by aggression, by hunting after the prey. In cats, it's after the hunt has happened. In other words, the things that keep a group together are nothing to do with the hunting itself, it's to do with after the hunt. And it's the semi-social things, it's the group bonding between the queens, fine, but it's also the bonding between the Toms and his own group. And if in any way they can advertise to each other it's a good place to be, that makes sense. So food coming back in and being displayed, it is something that actually bonds a group together, but it still does result usually in the food loss of that prey, of that individual. There has to be some reason as well as that going on. The particular rationale of Leroy bringing this back to me, or your cat bringing your prey back to you, I suppose that the bottom line is that we are such inept cats. In a way, it doesn't matter whether it's a male displaying generally territorially like Leroy, or whether it is the queen bringing prey back to her kittens and then competing with them. To both male and female cats of our group, we must seem such terribly inept kittens. We really haven't learned. We don't know how to deal with prey like this. I mean, my score for catching is virtually 0, where Leroy's is very, very high indeed. So, as well as just taking prey back into a core area, you may well have experienced the cat literally bringing prey to very close to you and then playing just beside you. And my cat will even call out in the middle of the night to let me know the prey has been caught. Not just in the amusement to him of killing the prey, but literally to let me know it's brought back in and here is something for you. Because I am the kitten who doesn't know what to do back in the nest, and it's about time I learned. When cats live with us, they spend quite a bit of time playing. When we live with cats, we spend quite a bit of time playing with them. Why? It does seem strange. It's nothing new, because if you go back, even in the 16th century, Montaigne made a very famous comment about when I play with my cat, am I gaining more from it? Or is it gaining more from it than I am? It's one of those enigmas. Who plays most with the other? I suppose we needn't worry. The thing is, we both play with each other for the same reason. See, it's easy from the outside to look at a cat and say, a kitten plays a lot with toys, and when it gets older it plays with prey, and therefore when we see this sort of behaviour going on, a cat like this is behaving towards us as if it is a kitten, and it's spending more time in play. It's juvenile behaviour. But turn the mirror around and look at ourselves fairly. When we're playing with a cat, or when we're playing football, or when we're just about playing with anything, it in itself is a juvenile behaviour. It's not about the serious, hard graft of going out into the fields and tilling the soil. In both of us, it is our kittenhood, it's our juvenile behaviour, and we're extending it. And let's face it, it's fun. There is a macabre side, though, because there is another side to play. There is that macabre game between cat and mouse. Play it may be, but it soon can collapse into a scene of contentment, and sitting by a fireside, it's the ideal place, you terror, to have that sound of purring coming up, soothing to me, and of course that's half its role. The feeling of that contented purr is something that can be passed on to other cats. Why is there such a thing as purring, and how does it work? Well, how it works seems to be that in here, if I push under there, that could actually stop Leroy purring by pressing on the vocal cords. And it seems to me it is just the movement of the air through the vocal cords. Although for a long time people have wanted to believe that there's something about the resonant sound of blood coursing through part of the animal. It's one of those mysteries. What doesn't seem to be a mystery, though, is why the cat does it. At face value, it's the most open and shut thing out. Cats purr when they're in a pleasured state. It might be after hunting, it might be sitting in front of a fire. What else could it possibly be? Well, it can be other things. It's not just in a sort of sitting scene like this. Think, have you ever taken a cat to the vet's? And has that cat then ever purred in a different sort of way, in an anxious way? It's not just about contentment. Purring can convey other things as well, and anxiety is certainly one of those things. Think again, is it just about small cats? No, it can be about big cats. Our small cats can purr on both the in and the out, in and the out breathing. But big cats just purr on one direction only. So it's something which the felids, the cats, have in common with each other. It's something that is just as vital to a tiger as it is to a tabby cat. And it seems to me that the bottom line that is both involved in anxiety and also is involved in contentment is about the general cat way of life in the dark. For example, imagine yourself at a tiger kill. There's a lot of young tigers there with a mum, and they're all having to feed together. It's not just a case of not scratching at the teats of the mother, it's not ripping each other to pieces with those claws. And purring while they're feeding conveys the message of, I am here. And I think that's the main thing why purring is involved. It says, I am here, in a time when you're not wanting to growl, you're not wanting to be aggressive, you're just trying to say, watch out folks, I'm here, don't do any harm. If you've ever had a cat wandering around underneath the duvet and you'll hear the purring when you're pressing around on the top of the bed, it's the same thing. It's just saying, I am here. But I think it's always seen at its best when you've got young kittens feeding beside their mother. The mother is purring to them and they are purring to her, each jostling alongside each other of those kittens for an individual teat, not wanting to push each other aside, but they all have a right to be there, and up comes this contented sound of, I am here, purr, purr.